I was your age, women didn't have names, and they only talked to men, and they only ever talked about men. You know what? Fuck you. Hey guys, it's Amy here, back again with another video. Showcasing feminism in the mediascape is a very long and strenuous journey, which I can't believe that people still can't get the bare minimum of. It literally infuriates me. Do you see this face? I mean, come on, how hard is feminism in storytelling? Everybody of every gender is treated the same. And if you've studied feminism in the media for even a fraction of your life, you've probably heard of the Bechdel Test. This is the most famous framework to see if a film is considered a feminist film. And it's famous because it's the bare minimum. And some people today still struggle to meet that bare minimum. I'm looking at you, Hollywood. Or is it? It has been used for so long and it's become the most famous. But back in the time it was created, perceptions of gender were different from how they are now. So does it need a reworking? Before we dive into that, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. I post new content every weekend on writing, books, and digital content for authors. Do you like fantasy books with action, blood feuds, and a strong female protagonist? Look no further. My book has you sorted, ASTER'S CODA Exposure. The link is in the description for you to buy. A YA fantasy in which Abby Tacker finds out her place in the three worlds. And yes, that book does pass the Bechdel test. Oh wait, you're asking what it is? Here, let me help you. The Bechdel test was first introduced to us in the form that we know today in 1985 from a comic by Alison Bechdel called Dykes to Watch Out For. In this particular comic strip, two female characters are going to the movies with the intention to find one that is a feminist. Their criteria for this is not met by any of the films in the box office and they go home unhappy. A film passes this Bechdel test if there are two female characters with names who talk to each other for a considerable amount of time, and at least one conversation that they have must not be about another man. The Bechdel test was given its name and its reputation when it circulated the internet in the 2010s. People genuinely use it now as a framework of study. This has been since considered the ideal form of dictating whether a film is equal in terms of gender, or the easiest one to make. It is applied to cinema, which is one of the most popular forms of storytelling, but for the sake of this, I will be talking about storytelling as a whole. This will mean that stats may be a bit different or a bit shifty across the board, but I shall do my best to give them a solid consideration. Now I know what you're thinking. Is that it? Is that the best way to represent feminism in the media? There is more to representing females and non-males, and more arguments have been made that the Bechdel test doesn't quite do it. Tell that to Hollywood then! On the Bechdel test website, only 58% of films submitted there passed. This was as of 2015. And in spite of that, films that also pass the Bechdel test do way better in the box office. And yet some production companies and directors still don't do that because they're bigoted dumbasses. While writing the script, I went through all the books on my bookshelf and off the top of my head determined whether or not they passed the Bechdel test. 28 out of 55 of them did. This is just over half, which is very, very similar to how it was in cinema back in 2015. And I can only expect the rest of the storytelling industry to be the same. Bit dismal, isn't it? In spite of that, we can still critique the Bechdel test and examine other frameworks that discuss feminism in a different way. Here are a couple of tests that test this representation. The sexy lamp test. If your character can be replaced by a sexy lamp and nothing changes in the story, you fucked up. The Make-O-More test. If you don't have a female character with their own character arc, or that female character has only character arcs to help men, you fucked up. The Anti-Freed test. If one female character is assaulted, injured, or killed to benefit another character's growth, you fucked up. The CODA test. If you don't have a female non-white character who speaks at least 5 lines of English, you fucked up. There are plenty more out there that talk about very specific ways in which non-males are presented, as each of these dictate how characters should be portrayed within the media. Maybe this just goes to show that there is not a bare minimum when it comes to feminism in the media. There is constantly ways to improve how we represent our characters. I know this for a fact as a feminist and as I write my own stories. I know there will be stories that will pass the Bechdel test, but other tests and other criteria they may not exactly meet. This is something that I do plan to improve with my ASTER'S CODA series, because while my first book doesn't really mention many non-binary or transgender characters, it does get into more consideration in books 2 and onwards. That being said, I also do want to make my own unofficial alternative to the Bechdel test. This unofficial test has got 7 pieces of criteria that need to be matched. Number 1, have at least 2 named non-male characters. Number 2, at least 2 of these characters must know and interact with each other. Number 3, these characters must have personal goals that don't involve another person, and at least one of them must succeed in reaching those goals. Number 4, at least one of these characters must contribute to the plot and be recognized for it. Number 5, these characters must have different ethnicities or backgrounds to each other. Number 6, at least one of these characters must live. And number 7, at least one of the characters' goals or arcs must not directly relate to their gender, race, or any other part of their identity. So that's my take on it. Let me know what you guys think of it down in the comments. What changes would you make? Okay, with that out of the way, we need to address the greater problem. What do we do about the films and the stories that don't pass the Bechdel test? Box offices, as I mentioned before, are already showing support for those films that do pass the Bechdel test. But that doesn't stop the films that fail from being praised and circulated. For the record, only half of the Best Picture nominations have actually passed the Bechdel test. What that simply means is that we need to find, support, and voice outlets that provide these feminist tales. Alternative media can be a good way to go. So yes, we need to be very active in the way that we consume these stories as a result. And of course, we need to write more stories like these to drown out the silence, because we need to get rid of the pricks who won't do the bare minimum. So that's all I've got for you on the Bechdel test. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you are new around here. You can ring that bell to find out when I post more creative content. And be sure to check out my novel that definitely passed the Bechdel test, ASTER'S CODA Exposure, a YA fantasy in which Abby Tacker learns about the 3 worlds and her place in them through an otherworldly blood feud. You can also check in the description for my Instagram, my Fiverr, my TikTok, and my website. Stay creative, everybody, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.